Ethanaya, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Glad to have you on board, beloved.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Glad to be here.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sounded like the brother Habibi Niles' voice. Wa alaikum salam. Getting a quick footnote pulled up here. Astaghfirullah, the title for tonight's Darrah might have gave someone a aha moment or like one of those. But alhamdulillah for Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, teaching us to do things like seeking knowledge from the cradle to the grave and seeking knowledge from here until China. So there's some knowledge in it, right? There's applicable knowledge in it. It's not going to shake anyone at all. The only thing it's going to do is point us directly to where the true Kaaba is. There might be two you have to brush out of the way, two, but there's one that's going to remain and one that's going to stay. Yes. We'll open up with a quick prayer. Kusai from Sheikh Afanu Bamba, Kadimul Rasul, Bihaki Wajika, which is by the truth of your face. Your face. All of y'all in attendance, your face. Look hard enough at your face. There's going to be some light reflected from within inside of it coming on the outside. And what else other than the light of Allah could that be? Alhamdulillah. If you're embodying these praiseworthy attributes, then you are one who is embodying praiseworthy attributes, one who is praiseworthy, Muhammad. So now that nur that's coming from within and shining out is praiseworthy. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإني أعوذها بك وذريتها من الشيطان الرجيم ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشيطان وأعوذ بك ربي أن يقدرون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم وبارك عليكم تحفيظ كل من حفيظك من الوباء بالفضل الله تعالى وخيا سبعة فين باغية لا اتنا بحفيظ لوجه الله تعالى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بحق وجهك الكريم يا حفيظ وجيل غير إلالي الغليظ بحق وجهك الكريم يا حفيظ وجي إليه غير إلالي الغليظ استغفر الله وجي إلى غير إلالي الغليظ إلى سوى حزبي وجل الوباء يا من سفاء دائما للوخباء لوجهك الكريم لا توجها لضررا وآلي منايا وجها أتت عني يا أيوبي يا معا يا من منايا لي بعمن جمها يقي لي الوباء الله قتا ولا إله إلا الله DJ run that back يقي لي الوباء الله قتا ولا إله إلا الله ظلم مها فأبدا نزلام وأبدا يخايني من زلموا فجاني الباقي بالأنفع السرور خير سلاميه على الخدير بشير فجاءني الباقي بأنفع السرور خير سلاميه على الهادي البشير فجاءني الباقي بالأنفع السرور خير سلاميه على الهادي البشير. By the holiness of your face, O Allah, the generous one and the protector, I ask you to direct rudeness elsewhere other than my family, this family. Alhamdulillah, I ask you to drive away the plague to others than my people. O you who always perpetuated our purity, by the sanctity of your holy face, I implore you not to direct any harm to me or us. However, I do ask you to drive forward all favors. You removed my shortcomings. You gathered up all advantages for me. My community is highly safeguarded against plague by Allah through the formula La ilaha illallah. Keep that secret. Put it in your pocket. Allah has wiped offense out of me. Therefore, I neither offend nor am I offended. It'll just into it. The everlasting has surprised me with great happiness. May his two blessings be upon the guide and the bearer of glad tidings. Alhamdulillah, by the truth of the face of Allah. May these and all things that we pray for in that name be sent to us expeditiously and multiplied by a number that only Allah can count to. I mean, we gotta raise a little vibe here real quick. So, what was that line that we repeated twice? No. Ya'ti'iyal wa ba'alahu fatan wa la ilaha illallah. My community is highly safeguarded against plagues by Allah through the formula of La ilaha illallah. So we're going to do 100 of those guys real quick. Jeff Sheikh Zulu. But open everything up. Billahi minash shaitanir rajim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi wa huwa al-azim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. La ilaha illallah. 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 La ilaha Allahu la ilaha illallah. 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 La ilaha Allahu la ilaha illallah illallah la ilaha illallah la ilaha illallah la ilaha Sheikh before la ilaha Allahu la ilaha illallah la ilaha illallah la ilaha before la ilaha illallah 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 la ilaha Allah la ilaha illallah la ilaha illallah la ilaha illallah. La ilaha Allahu la ilaha illallah. 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 La ilaha Allahu la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha la ilaha illallah. 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 Allahu la ilaha illallah. 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 Jetty Jeopardy board on tuba. In an all white booba. Let's check what we got here. We'll run the greeting back for those that may have joined after the greeting was given the first go around. Assalamu alaikum to all beloveds in the building. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Bilal, Sheikh Zayed.
Alaikum salam. My sister. Love to hear your voice. Hey. So here. We probably can't answer the question of the title of the class right now, right? But which Kaaba is the imposter? Allah doesn't fit in the heavens nor in the earth, but he does fit in the heart of a true believer. So Kaaba is the imposter. Inshallah, we got to cross the sandy beach and then get to the boat right there by the ocean. And then we can get in the boat. And then we'll go out into the ocean. Like Sheikh Bamba said, we must get in the boat before we get in the ocean. So to frame that, which Kaaba is the imposter, I will say there'll be a good bit of history references. There'll be some geographical locations. There will be a hadith or two, but scattered throughout all of that, there'll be a couple of keywords that I'll put emphasis on. So just in case anybody does have a little notebook, just jot those keywords down. And if there's any questions at all, I just finished 781 pages of a book on the topic after another one, but we'll be able to build it and keep moving forward. But by the last sentence of what we have typed up here, it's all going to be clear. Alhamdulillah. But there are plenty of unspoken indicators, right, in the Quran and the Hadith, alongside a whole bunch of other references that we can read and seek and research and study about Mecca in pre-Islamic, right, pre-Islamic, and in Syriac, and in Greek, and in Latin, and in other non-Arabic historical references that may or may not, to some, prompt some skepticism about kind of how things may be presented today. Jada Jeff sitting tuba, but what he told us about what happened to the Kaaba and where it went. Some might think after or before even thinking about it, like, well, something just don't quite look right or add up. So was this actually a major pre-Islamic pilgrimage site at all? Keyword pre-Islamic. And is it even in the right location for it to be what the Arab taught us that it was supposed to be, for us to orient our whole body to facing whatever direction east, right? So over the past generation, there's been quite an array of theories and whatnot in regards to these Hajj origins, where the Hajj takes place at, and what's at that place where the Hajj takes place at. And one of the very first ones, keyword incoming, one of the very first chronological historical references about 700 years before Islam, right? 600 to 700 years before the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It was a Roman era. We'll be truthful about it. It's a Greco-Roman era geography called Ptolemy. I forget which one it was. However, this particular one was in this area between about 100 BC and 70 BC. So there was a Greco-Roman era geographer called Ptolemy that placed this city that he called Macoraba, Macoraba. He placed this city called Macoraba in Arabia in 100 BC, between 100 BC to 70 BC. Alhamdulillah. Right. However, in order for it to match up with what is believed today about Mecca, Ptolemy's Macoraba, we'll write that one down. Macoraba would have to be in a completely different spot where this Greco-Roman geographer Ptolemy put it on his map. You can look the map up also, if you just put those two keywords together. Ptolemy, Ptolemy, and Macoraba, Macoraba. It'll be a couple of black and whites and some colored maps, but look closely at the map and then look for what you should see but don't, and look for something that you do see that sounds like what we're looking for, because we're looking for a Mecca, right? But on Ptolemy's map, he speaks of a Macoraba houseway. Let's see if we can pull one of these here. Something new today. Long, hard look, right? Long, hard look. So the bottom red arrow is pointing to where Mecca is today, right? But there's no Mecca on that map where that arrow is pointing right to it at. It's not there at all. But if we zoom in a bit, or even better, we use this reference. Boom. There we are. Right below this C word, Casinate, is where Mecca is on every single map you look up today. But if you go a little bit north, there's that place called Macoraba that Ptolemy kind of mapped out on his journey throughout Arabia, coming from north to south and then back up again during those 30 years, you don't say. So if that's attributed to him, and how does it reconcile? How do we reconcile it? All the other cities that he went to and saw, some might say founded or documented and then put on maps, some of those have been there ever since that time frame and before. However, if you look up Nicaragua on the map right now today, it's not on no map in this exact same spot. So won't dwell too much on that because it's just to lead in. Pre-Islam, as remember, that was one of the key words. Ptolemy, Greco-Roman geographers, and Macoraba. Those are the first couple of sets of keywords. So historically, this particular Ptolemy is from a very early source, well before the Islamic era that we're all comfortable with, that we have this present level of knowledge about. And this Macoraba, I mean, Macoraba, I mean, Macorabi does kind of sound like, if you apply some Arabic or Syriac or Greek or Latin linguistic tools for it and see how the word, looks and is formed together, we might be able to separate Mecca and Rabba and determine what those two words meant before they were put together to make a new word. But it does kind of sound like Mecca. It might be linguistically on point, but we'll have to do a little bit of study. And I got 2 more books on the way, so we'll catch up on that later. But it might point to some sort of truth, or it might point to some sort of error about this particular topic. This Greco-Roman geographer, Ptolemy, and his pre-Islamic mention, way before pre-Islamic mention of this place that some were saying might be Mecca. He just put it in the wrong place on the map, and he spelled it wrong. Or it might be a hint at some sort of pre-Islamic Arab history that does give validity to the Kaaba and Mecca of today. Or honestly, it might just demolish it all, depending on how far we go out into the ocean. But we're going to find ourselves in the ocean, so nothing gets demolished except for everything that we are not. All right. So one of my favorite historians and geographers, other than this particular Ptolemy, because a lot of his literature still out and floating around, and some has even been translated into English, alhamdulillah, so we can kind of, we can really do some serious study on this area where a lot of us do trace ourselves back to. Dan Gibson, you gotta be careful with Dan Gibson's name because some Muslims don't like Dan Gibson, but Dan Gibson did 30 or 40 years of like going to these places type of research, like actual geographical locations, archaeology, and he studied Qibla directions. I know somebody here knows what that is, right? This Qibla direction, this will be figure out and point to. That's where the Kaaba is in my house. It's right there. If I just point myself that way, project myself all the way across the water, across Africa and into Arabia, I'll land right there in front of the Kaaba. But Dan Gibson and all of his books, we'll just say all of them, he studied those also before the Islamic Golden Age and in a quote unquote pre-Islamic time frame. And he found, oh man, I can't remember the number. There's about, we'll say, I don't want to throw the number out, but there's at least 15 to 20 from this picture I can see in my head of him circling ancient mosques from a pre-Islamic time frame and then literally going there. Like, he didn't just Google them online. Like, he went there and he took every single one of his tools. And when he found the base for an ancient mosque that was in that area, what Dan Gibson wound up doing is breaking out his tools, it compass and everything, so that he can geographically locate himself exactly where he is. And he already knows the coordinates for Kaaba and Mecca, so he can project these lines on maps to see where the trajectory goes. Dan Gibson found a whole bunch of ancient mosques from the pre-Islamic time frame that do not point to Mecca. You don't say. Astaghfirullah. But they're not even pointing to Jerusalem. They're not even pointing to Jerusalem. It's slightly off a bit. It's, remember the reference of turn your face from where everybody was praying at before. They're saying that the Muslims before they were praying towards Jerusalem, and in the middle of that, Allah sent Angel Jibril down, told them, no, orient yourself towards the Kaaba at Mecca. So they turned and reoriented themselves, and this is where the Qibla direction that we know of today comes from. But all those other ancient mosques from the pre-Islamic time frame were not pointing at today's Mecca, and they weren't pointing to Jerusalem either, nowhere near it, a few degrees off. But we'll get to that location as we travel just a little bit further. Throw hands up if there are any questions throughout. But Dan Gibson, what I will add is that he did so much open-minded and non-biased archaeological research based off of chronological history that when you got that much truth in chronological history, sometimes myth doesn't quite match up. Sorry. The myth doesn't even have a scimitar in the fight. Stop for a lie, like ain't no Muslim gonna say you don't even have a gun in the fight. No, you don't have a scimitar in the fight. But before we ask which Kaaba is the imposter, we gotta figure out how many were there in the pre-Islamic time frame, right? The trick is to take studying, like Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon us, taught us to seek knowledge from the cradle to grave. Learn something every day until you can't breathe to learn anything. Like seek knowledge from here and to China. If you just so happen to cross over Mecca, seek knowledge in Mecca, but you keep on going to China. All right, keep on going to China because there's some mosques over there too. There's some Muslims over there too. And we'll always bump into something that will always lead us back to Allah. But the trick is to not use any Islamic literature when you take off doing that type of research. Because if you use Islamic literature, it's only going to be written from the Islamic time frame up until today. There won't be any pre-Islamic time frames mentioned at all, because y'all know if we go back too far in any part of Saudi Arabia that's close to Africa, you are going to see people who look like me and him. Right? You're going to go back so far enough to where if we could literally just time travel and go back, you might bump into somebody that looks like you, right? Might bump into somebody who looks like your mom, might bump into somebody who looks like your grandparents or something or another, because some of us do have genetic ties to those places at a point in time before there was this big religious split, right? That's obviously split. Just look at what's going on over there now. But first, we will use some Islamic references, right? We're not just going. We got to lead everyone in. So there's some hadith. There's not a lot of them, but there are a few that bring us right before the time of the Islamic Golden Age. Volume 2, book number 26, and hadith number 598 in Sahih Bukhari. Volume 2, book number 26 in the volume, and number 598. Narrated Ibn Abbas. The people of Yemen used to come for Hajj, and they used to not bring enough provisions with them, like not enough food and water. And they used to say, oh, we depend on Allah. We depend on Allah. We depend on Allah. We're going to make it to where we need to go. We depend on Allah. On their arrival to Medina, the people of Yemen used to come for Hajj and not bring enough stuff with them. But when they got to Medina, they used to ask the people for spare provisions, water, food, and things like that to continue the journey. So Allah revealed and take a provision with you for the journey. But the best provision is the fear of Allah, being conscious of Allah. So they were definitely conscious of Allah right in this hadith. They just might not have took enough with them to make that long journey from Yemen, South Arabia, right? Yemen's in South Arabia. Mecca is on the way from Yemen in South Arabia, right? So if I'm leaving Yemen and South Arabia and getting ready to go to the Hajj in Mecca, I would get to Mecca first, right? Right. The people of Yemen used to come for Hajj and not bring enough provisions with them. And they used to say, we depend on Allah. We're conscious of Allah. We depend on Allah. But when they arrived at Medina, they used to ask the people for extra provisions so that they could continue to make their journey. Why did they skip Mecca and then go further to go to Medina to get more water and food, to then turn around and then come back to Mecca? Volume 2, book number 26, hadith number 598. South Arabia. It's in South Arabia. Mecca is on the way from Yemen if I was going to Medina. And Medina is after Mecca if I was leaving Yemen and going directly to Medina. So if I'm leaving Yemen and South Arabia and I'm going on the Hajj in Mecca, which is before Medina, why stop in Medina to renew the water and the provisions and then turn right back around in Mecca, since they passed it on the way to Medina in that hadith? But wait, there's more. Book number 8. Right. Book number 8, number 2477. So that's a big volume, big books in that volume, but very few hadith that mention things like this. Narrated Ibn Hawala, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, it will turn out that you will be armed troops. One is Syria, one is in the Yemen, and one is in Iraq. Oh, look at them places today. Ibn Hawala said, choose for me, O Apostle of Allah, if I reach that time. So he replied, go to Syria, for it is Allah's chosen land. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, replied to Ibn Hawala and said, go to Syria, for it is Allah's chosen land, to which the best of servants will be gathered. But if you are unwilling, then go back to your Yemen and draw water from your tanks. For Allah hath on my account taken special charge of Syria and its people. Wait, what? Go to Syria because that's the chosen land of Allah? I thought Mecca was that land. Wait, servants are gonna be gathered there in Syria? But I thought the servants supposed to be gathered in the Kaaba in Masjid al-Quran. All right. We don't go to Hajj in either of those locations, nowhere in Syria and not in Yemen. There's no Kaaba in Yemen. And there is no Kaaba in Syria. Now, but why make fun of Yemen's water resources in that same hadith? Because remember, we're picturing ourselves like coming from Yemen, and then we're passing the place where Mecca is today, and then we get to Medina. Or in this particular case, Ibn Hawala is speaking with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he's telling them, hey, there's some places where they're going to be Muslims that are eventually probably going to take over in the future. So Prophet Muhammad, choose for me which one of these places you would like for me to go to represent, essentially. I hate to paraphrase hadith, but Prophet Muhammad in this hadith replied to him and said, "Go to Syria because it's Allah's chosen land, to which his best servants will be gathered." Don't we all go get gathered around the Kaaba, walk around it in circles? But if you're unwilling, go to Yemen and draw water from your tanks. It might have water down there, but it ain't no Zamzam. I know that much, right? It might have some water in Yemen, but it's not Zamzam. Because Allah, on his account, has taken special charge of Syria and its people. Well, Yemen did have a lesser water quality than Mecca. I mean, they're close to salt. You know, I get it, but how? Leave Yemen, skip Mecca, and make it to Medina. And Ptolemy does an entire tour of the entirety of Arabia, right? Every single country and town that existed there, he put on that map. The majority of all of those are in the exact same spot today if we were to look them up, if they were grown into metropolises. But this Makoraba, the keyword Makoraba, that is on his old map, it ain't there today. Unless he put it in the wrong spot. What a trick. But don't worry, we can dispel it. We can definitely reconcile it. What they say in the Kabbalion and the Hermetic wisdom, all truths are half truths. Like everything can be reconciled. Everything can be reconciled. Everything can be reconciled. So there's a direct reference to the Hajj and Mecca, and it appears in Al-Nabiha al-Dubaini's celebrated ode or poem addressed to this Lakhmid king, Al-Nu'man ibn al-Mundhir. Bilal I ain't read this one out loud yet. I swear by the life of he whose Kaaba I have circled. Right? And I swear by the thick blood poured upon the sacrifice stones. By the Lord, preserver of birds and his sanctum, touched by the riders to Mecca between the wells Al-Hayl and Al-Sad. It's a poem, right? So not a straight coherent sentence, but when I'm pretty sure we would have recited this in some Eastern form of language or whatever this this Lockbit King spoke, it might sound sing-songy, it might sound poetic, and it may give us a feeling. But this brother said, this person said, he swears by the life of he whose Kaaba he circled, right? So in this old Hadith reference, or this note to this Lockmit king, Al-Nadir al-Dubaini says he circled the Kaaba. So if we close our eyes and picture people going on Hajj, like we can see them circumambulating the Kaaba. But you can astral travel your black self to every single square inch of Mecca in Saudi Arabia today, and there ain't no blood sacrifice stones in Mecca today. But here we are again, a poem that was referenced and translated from back in the pre-Islamic time frame. So we'll back up a bit to frame everything to the hadith about the Yemeni Hajj and these so-called sacrifice stones. We'll make it all make chronological, historical sense, and the esoteric is right at the end. So there's a place called, I don't get the name yet, there's a place in southern Jordan. There's this city called Petra. There's a city called Petra where everything that doesn't so quite line up with some of these references that you'll probably never hear your mom talk about in the mosque actually lines up with the chronological history and not so much as the Islamic history, because remember, if we go back far enough to any part of that land, us, not the types of people that look like they belong there today, because they came from somewhere else. If we go to southern Jordan, it don't look like much, right? It's mountain passes that kind of come together and then spread out into a valley and then eventually separate hundreds and hundreds of miles on back. So it don't look like much is there. But if you're going past this mountain face, you'll see a crevice or a crack inside the rock about the width of two front doors to your house. So however large your front door is, imagine there being a crack in a mountain that's about 1.25 miles long. Who else was working with stone and at such a capacity back then in the pre-Islamic time frame? Alhamdulillah. But on the outside of this complex, you'll see this crevice they call a Sikh, S-I-Q, which just means crack, crevice, way to enter. On the outside, there are what they are known to be called gin blocks. There's still gin blocks that look kind of like the ones in Mecca today that are right on the outside of this complex in Petra in southern Jordan. There's still even small rocks laying at the bottom of those blocks on the outside of this complex. There are two mountain passes there, right? A big one this side, big one that side. And water is irrigated through them. Remember that reference from Prophet Muhammad said, if you don't want to go up there, go back to Yemen and get the water from down there. Because the water down there ain't as good as the water up here. The water in this particular location is irrigated from the top of the mountains. So it comes down into this complex by darn near perfectly cut irrigation channels to where they don't have to go out of that complex to go look for any water at all. So start for a lot for saying Prophet Muhammad kind of threw a little shade, or like it might have been I don't want to say it was a joke or let's keep it HR appropriate shake. It's a comparison on water quality, right? If I had the choice to go drink some salt water from Saudi Arabia, go drink some Zamzam from Mecca, you can catch me in Mecca with Zamzam. They're irrigating in all that water from the mountain passes surrounding this complex. Where do they keep it? They store it in huge water tanks up underground. And you kind of have to stop, zam, to realize these channels are cut through the mountain and they're cut into the Sikh, this crevice that leads us into this city called Petra. So even if you get thirsty walking into the city, scoop some water up out of the channel that's bringing the water into the city. It's an abundance and was an abundance in that location. Some people say, Astaghfirullah, don't Allahu Akbar me and cut my head off. Some people say those two mountain passes are Safa and Mara. On either side of what used to be a Kaaba. There used to be a big old square, almost in the exact same dimension as the one that's in Mecca today. But it's partially destroyed now. So some of the dimensions are kind of difficult to get. Also, Petra in southern Jordan, same exact spot where Abraham left Hagar and Ishmael. Why, you might say? There weren't any irrigation channels in that mountain path way back then in the time of Abraham, peace be upon him, because this is ancient. Like if we call this an Abrahamic religion, it started with him way back. So dropping off Hagar and Ishmael in a place like this, there might not have been. I wasn't there. I can't verify it and say, but judging how that place was set up and how long it was in use, especially during the time frame where people who looked like us were there, there are remnants of those same carved water channels in that area. So let's say Abraham and Hagar and Ishmael was going through the desert during the time of a drought in that particular Hadith. And then they're left there in this complex. So now, literally looking at a Black woman running back and forth between certain sections of these two mountain passes because she knows that there are supposed to be irrigation channels on this mountain pass that brings water from the top of the mountains down into the valley and then comes into the crevice that leads into the city. And then they're directed off, one to this side and one to that side, for two big, huge water tanks that if we were to go to Petra in southern Jordan today, we can see them tanks. Ain't no water in them right now. That's in another hadith. We can't go there today. We can't go there today, but those irrigation channels lead one directly into that sacred city. So, of course, you would have had to stop. You just said Sam. Angel Jabril shows up and she turns around, and where is Angel Jabril? Standing right over some of those water tanks because he knows where the water is. And up spurts a miraculous source of water that it seemed like was not there at all. This is why in the previous hadith, when the people left Yemen from South Arabia, and they got to Medina first in the pre-Islamic time frame to get more food and water and provisions, and then they continued traveling to Mecca, which during that particular point in time was called Becca. It's called Becca. I wish I could find through that book because Becca is mentioned in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So imagine how ancient that place is. And if it's mentioned in that book, what kind of people lived there back then? Well, never let anybody impose a culturally edited Islam that does not come from you and your people and your culture, your walk, talk, way of life that you can verify that your ancestors have been practicing ever since the pre-dynastic periods of Egypt. We have our own history before Gog and Magog come over the mountain. We have our own history before the Khazars come over the mountain. We have our own history before the Indo-Aryans came over the mountain, and all of our spirituality, the essence of our being, and why we're here is already on the inside of us. Genetics in our blood. It's in our DNA, like Kendrick Lamar said. So, I don't want to go back to this, but what did brother say when he mentioned? We'll just go ahead and say it. At that point in time afterwards, with people doing blood sacrifices there, that place was taken over. Was taken over by Greco-Romans who called themselves Nabateans. This is kind of why, if we look at this Nabatean script from the people who lived in Petra during that time frame, it kind of looks like Hebrew, but it kind of looks like Arabic. But it's written linguistically in a way to where if you even try to read it in Arabic, it don't make no sense. If you try to read it in Hebrew, it don't make no sense because some of it's Hebrew, some of it's Syriac, some of it's Aramaic. There are what look like Shiva lingams in this site, right? I know some of the Hindu brothers know what a Shiva lingam looks like, right? But I'm not going to do that. But you have the lingam in the middle, and there's this square base that the lingam sits on. Circle around the lingam, coming out forward to a small spout. That's exactly what's on top of those mountain passes in Petra in southern Jordan. But from a time frame when people who look like us weren't there anymore. That's where that particular hadith might have happened at. So now we kind of have a hint, right? At a Kaaba in Petra and in southern Jordan. And southern Jordan was primarily controlled at the latest point in time before the Islamic time frame were controlled by Nabateans. who are Greco-Romans, pretending to be somebody else, essentially. So what about the other one? Sheikh, at the beginning of the fact, you said it might be two, or it might have been. How, Sway? Don't leave me hanging. This is the eastern corner of what's left of that the stock fair lot for calling it the Kaaba, so we'll just call it a cube. You know, stay HR appropriate. This is what's left of that cube in Petra and in southern Jordan. And remember my brother, one of my favorite archaeologist and historian, Dan Gibson, when he went to all of those ancient mosques before all of the wars that kind of happened during that time frame with the schisms, he went to all of those ancient mosques and went to sites just like this and found the niche in the wall that directs us to where the Qibla is and pinpointed each and every single one of them. And each and every single one of them is pointing at this in ancient and old mosques before the Islamic time frame. Even if astaghfirullah in all caps, because I know capital letters in Arabic, if somebody were to astaghfirullah again, I'm not one of them types of people, but if you were to just lift up your current masjid, probably not over here in America, but let's just say if we go to a mosque somewhere in Libya, per se, you don't demolish it, you lift it up off of its base, and then you look around at the old base that marked out where the original floor was, and you realize Qibla in the new mosque was pointing this way, but the Qibla in the old mosque was pointing that way, towards this. But that's just one. That's just one, and it's from a pre-Islamic time frame. So not to separate us from Islam, just remember that even back then, we had this way of life. Even back then, we were all on a similar accord to where when we prayed, we focused our energy in a particular direction that must have been in a very important spot. Astrologically, it may have lined up with some stuff that I can't explain right now. I might have to talk to Sheikh Mound Builder about this, about that one. But that's not talked about at all. It's not talked about at all because the stuff are alive, but diving too deep. But has anybody ever just sat and looked at people going on the Hajj and just watching them do each of the stations of the Hajj, whether they're doing the circumambulation or they're trying to get close to the Black Stone, or they're running back and forth between Safa and Marwa? How is Safa and Marwa two mountains in all of those hadiths? But if you go to Mecca, Safa and Marwa are inside of a building, probably no bigger than just the top of my roof. Those mountain passes ain't big at all. They really don't look like they belong. If one were to really pay attention, like somebody carved that. How is there tile up under it? Why ain't no water coming down from it? Where are water channels at that show up in the hadith? Where's the rest of the mountain? Because there's a mountain pass. The mountain continues to pass by. That means it's a stretch of mountains, just like we see behind this particular cube. Like that's just a small piece of the mountain pass. The house, way. Look up the cube of Zoroaster. Not to point anybody toward Zoroastrianism because that's not us, but just look up the cube of Zoroaster, and it would be amazing to me if Dan Gibson would or someone could map out ancient sites before the time frame we just kind of went through and go to this particular thing. That's in back then, I guess what was called Persia, but would be like, I guess, what Iran nowadays, and in that area. If there wasn't excavation down at the bottom of this photo and all we had was the sand on the top, the dimensions of that Kaaba are almost the same as the dimensions of the one that we just looked at in Petra in southern Jordan. Slightly narrower, but the essential dimensions, all the math adds up, which would be expanded. It would line up with the previous one and also almost line up with the current one today. Cube of Zoroaster. Whoa. What's it pointing at? I don't think I took a screenshot of what it's pointing at, but boom, just like them rock churches in Ethiopia, it took some masterminds to put some stuff like that together, regardless of any separation in belief, or because we've now went back a little bit too far with chronological history to where current day Islamic history just ain't lining up with, right? The cube of Zoroaster, or we would have pronounced it in Farsi, or I don't think they were speaking Farsi back then, but it's cool. Where am I reading from tonight? About a 751 page book about early Islamic qiblas and the origin of Mecca and North Arabia. Dan Gibson's whole entire channel. The movie about Petra called the Red City or the Sacred City, and even some apologetic videos I looked at from the Muslim perspective, because if you say this around a Muslim, they're going to deny it vehemently. But chronological history, when we're looking for concrete truth, start for a lot of y'all, but chronological history can actually possess it. Whereas in some cases, the religious history cannot, because in some of the religious stories, there are a lot of applicable metaphors that we have to use to embody and not quite look at them all just at the surface. But this is the Kaaba Zoroaster, is how that's as close as I could translate it. I was talking for a lot, but the Kaaba Zoroaster, or the cube of Zoroaster. But why is it there? It also has to be in the complex, right? The last two that we were speaking of were also in a complex. The cube of Zoroaster is pointed directly to the tombs of Darius II, Artaxerxes II, Darius the Great, and Xerxes. So don't stress or be too afraid about diving into or looking into some chronological history while also still studying what we study. And don't stress the information presented. Remember them keywords, please. But we can still reconcile it all. Even though we just went from how we understand Mecca today to a hadith that mentioned people coming from Yemen for the Islamic time frame, they go past where Mecca is today and they get to Medina, and then they keep on going north to more than likely probably get to a place called Petra in southern Jordan. I don't have much chronological history about like religious things with the Zoroastrians, because I just don't have any interest in it. Stop her a lot. But even then, how they may have been living in their community, I can't verify, but I'm pretty sure they had some sort of religious rites. Everybody prays. Everybody prays. Everybody prays. And if you know somebody that don't pray, run. Run. So yeah, there might be a cube in Iran. So it's another deep. It's good things to know. What else? Yeah, there might have been one in Petra in southern Jordan at another time frame, a little bit further forward in history. But shoot, it's not there now. There's no mosques today pointing at that old. that old cube. However, all of the mosques on the face of the earth right now are pointing at the one that we are acclimated with. So us coming from like a Sufi order, who I don't think anybody can say that just because there may have been other places that had something similar and they used to be praying towards that way, but now we're praying towards this way. Does that mean that it don't work, Sheikh? No, no. Allah says in the Quran, wherever you turn your face, wherever you turn your face, there is the face of Allah. So I caught myself last week coming home from work, washed up and did wudu, looked out my prayer rug and just went right on it, Allahu Akbar, and then got done praying. And I realized that instead of my prayer rug pointing this way, it wasn't even clocked to the eastern corner of my house. I was kind of pointing this painting I got over here. I need to flip my prayer rug and turn back around and make salat again. And that Quran verse came through. Whichever way you turn your face, there is the face of Allah. So even if we study chronological history on this path and we bump into something called the cube of Zoroaster, it's the Kaaba Zoroaster. It's the cube of Allah over there, right? Remember the Wednesday night Darrah, if we really understand La ilaha illallah, and you just so happen to read the Rig Vedas or the Upanishads and you hear someone describing the goodness and graciousness of Brahman, and you get the exact same tingly spiritual feeling on the inside when you're studying and meditating on this and doing these mantras. That's because that's Allah over there, right? Different time frame or for different people. Allah sent messengers from all people to them people with a message from himself. And in some cases, like we just saw with chronological history, those people personified it differently, right? They personified it differently. Does that mean that they didn't still have a religious right, a way of life that they ascribed to, a culture, a spiritual system, and a inner tradition? Yes, it definitely did have it. Otherwise, how could we be sitting here studying it today and comparing it to what we do have today? Even if we go to that time frame with all of that, Greco-Roman history is kind of rough. But even if we go back to that particular hadith about what they were doing when they were inhabiting that place at that time frame, I'm not using that reference in regards to anything religious because there's no sacrifice, no people in Islam. However, they had something they thought that they were doing that was correct, and I guess it made their society work up until Allah smited and then destroyed that place by an earthquake, and now that's why I can't hold water anymore. There's a teaching from Sheikh Abdul Muhammad that tells us that get your passport, save up some money, and buy a ticket to Tuba. Even if you save your money and get your passport and buy your ticket to Tuba during the month of Ramadan, go to Tuba. Also, and why? Reconcile it. Sheikh Abdul Muhammad mentioned that the angels, along with the angel Jibril, came down and lifted the spiritual Kaaba from that place and brought it all the way across Africa to Tuba, Senegal, and dropped it down right there where the great mosque of Tuba is. We don't have to go anywhere else. We don't have to go pretend to be anybody else. We don't have to forget about who we are today and what we have today to go study something else at all. Take off the Obama already divinely prepared it. So even if your prayer rug is still pointed towards the Kaaba at Mecca, please do leave it there. Shariat Mogana War. Senegalese phrase, Wolof phrase. Shariat Mogana War. It's safer with the Shariat. Safer that way. It's safer that way. However, I don't even need a laptop for this one. Let's look at some some figures and some numbers here real quick. Depending on the type of, I guess, package you get when you go take the Hajj and go to Mecca, y'all, I cried when I looked this up because there's no way in the world it should cost that much. Go do something such as that action that beloved by Allah. It should not cost me anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 just to go over there for a few days to do that. What are you? This black me talking. Make a pilgrimage to the Hajj if you have the ability to do so. Bro, if it costs 10 bands, I ain't never gonna have the ability to do so. If I can take a 30-second of that and take my black behind over to Tuba and still have a spiritual experience and still see Allah, still feel Allah, still see Allah looking at me and be able to talk to Allah over there in Tuba just like we could do over in Mecca. The angels and the angel Jibril came down and lifted up that spiritual essence of that Kaaba and brought it over to Mosque Masalik Jannah in Tuba, Senegal. So how, unless, not how, let's say this. In order for Sheikh Abdul Bamba to even have told us that, he had to know some history outside of West Africa, right? In order for Sheikh Abdul Bamba to tell us that, he had to know some chronological history about what was really happening in an area, and he had to know religious and spiritual history in regard to this area that we orient ourselves with. And he had to study it to a point to where he could bring it forward for our people so that, astaghfirullah, if there's any super religious ones in the building, but the Islam we have in West Africa, the Islam that we've already had in Africa before the pre-Islamic time frame, because remember this what we were at the beginning, the pre-Islamic time frame, but the Islam, the peace, the spirituality that we had then is exactly what we have now. The perfect spot for us to go experience it is in Tuba, in Senegal. And you won't have to spend anywhere near no $7,000 to $10,000 to go have an experience over there with those brothers. You won't have to spend anywhere near that much money to get a room in Tuba and to stay there for a few days. You won't have to spend that much money to get in. All you got to do is show up and go pray. I guarantee you, one prayer, you can go make Asa at that mosque in Tuba and then turn around and leave. You can go make one prayer at that mosque in Tuba. The number of black and brown people that can fit inside of that complex, y'all, it is astro-freaking-nomical. It's almost asinine how that when you look at that mosque from the top view, that it goes for blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks. And then that way, blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks. So it in itself is an oblong square, but huge. And the entire complex is full. The entire complex is full of everyone having just as spiritual an experience there as they would even if they were in Mecca. Even though they aren't. The Qibla in that mosque is directed towards the Mecca that we do know today. So even if you can't make it to Mecca, everything about Tuba is more than enough for us over here in the West. I mean, everything about the fact that when we get off that plane, there's nowhere you can look where you won't see somebody who looks like you. There's nowhere you're going to look to where you won't see somebody smiling at you. There's nowhere where you will not be at to where you have to worry in that city. There's nowhere where you have to be at to where you get sideways looks by some Arab with his nose up in the air because you showed up a Starfield. Sending to Virginia because it doesn't matter where we wound up going, what we wound up studying. If we stick with him, his teachings in those paths, they'll bring us right back to Tuba, right back to that mosque there, right back around all those people there, all the teachings that came from there and got to us over here. And just erase all the other copies that might have existed in the past, because remember what we get from him to kind of bring everything in. Quran says Allah don't fit in the heavens or the earth, but he fits in the heart of a true believer. So where is the real Kaaba? Right here. So that prayer I did last week where my rug was tilted a little bit, as long as when I was in that zone, I was focused on my heart space. I was working from here. I was focusing on here. I'm polishing the window. I'm polishing the mirrors in here. I'm spraying spick and span everywhere to make sure it's clean. I am oriented perfectly to the Kaaba. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I got to let the rest of myself fall back in the body. Are there any questions at all? Did anybody jot on any of those keywords, just in case there's some comparative analysis and any study needed, or any help building? Inshallah, the floor is open. Y'all, I love history. Sorry. So to make it all, according to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Mecca is a synonym for the East, located in Arabia Deserta, or the desert, but it's actually in Arabia Petra in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, circa 2400 to 2300 BC. That's how ancient Islam is in West Africa, y'all. It speaks of a place called Mecca. So according to E.A. Wallace Budge, the person who did a lot of translating on the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which we call the Book of the Dead, but it's the person moving here, the book of coming forth that day from night. Right. He says, we also find this cross-referenced and confirmed linguistically in an Egyptian hieroglyphic dictionary, volume 2, with an index of English, Latin transliterated words, kings lists, pharaoh lists, geographical lists with indexes and references, lists of hieroglyphic characters, Coptic and Semitic alphabets. We see that Mecca is a synonym for the East among the ancient Egyptians. But Mecca is also described as this exact same spot, right? Conversely, Mecca is also the original name of Mecca. Even if we look in some hadith in the Quran, like it mentions Mecca in certain translations, but there are other translations where they'll put a little squiggly on the ba, so they can turn that ba into a meme. Daggone Arabs. But much about Mecca seems to be unknown nowadays. He says himself not being a linguist nor wanting to be accused of pushing a square peg through a round hole, but of course, depending on the size of that square peg, it can go through a round hole. He can't help but to place Mecca in the land of Canaan. E.A. Wallace Budge, a doggone Egyptologist, and we know how they don't like to point anything towards us. It's always got to be pointed back towards them. Mecca is in the land of Canaan. But who Canaan is? From the south. Who's Canaan? All right. descendant of who? Descendant of Ham. Like we got Ham, we got Cush, we got Phut, we got Mizraim, and Canaan, all coming from the same black seed, right? So he says he places it in Canaan. He says, yeah, of course, much more study needs to be done on that point alone. But what he has noticed is that where etymologists are unsure, something is actually being concealed, which is why the etymologists don't fight. No. Now, I like the fact that this guy says what's next, right? Because he kind of shouts us out and he helps to make a connection. He says, well, he's noticed that most of the time in those cases, those etymologists are unsure. And in cases where people that say they should know about things like this are also unsure about things like this, that means they're concealing something about this. What Noble Drew Ali said, Moors don't conceal, we reveal. He references Drew Ali in the Moors of America in this book. He says something is usually being concealed, which is why you can see that when the Moors of America woke up to the fact that they are Moabites and the founders of the ancient city of Mecca, we won't look for validation for how we practice our Islam from anywhere else. Because he mentions this from a copy of the Egyptian Book of the Dead that's dated back to 2400 to 2300 BC. It's 751 pages, y'all. That's one of the main books for the Jamil. It's not even really expensive for how thick it is. But when I tell you there's heat on each and every single one of them 751 pages. And in between some of those spots of heat in those 751 pages, there's references like that point those practices, that point those rights, that point the people who were the only ones building things like that. It points it all right back to us. Islam. Islam. Well, allow me a brief one to go through the chat to see if there were any questions missed or on the live. Beautiful and beautiful. If all hearts and minds are clear, I definitely hope that a couple of those keywords were jotted down. If not, I'll have to slightly edit this one, and we're only gonna keep this transcript in the Sufi order. I don't see it's up on your Facebook page. Alhamdulillah. If all hearts and minds are clear to close. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله وهو العلي العظيم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. The unveiling origin of Mecca, the rise of ancient Islam in North Arabia. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد الآخر وسلم عليه وعلى آله وصحبه واغفرني أبدا بجاهه في الدخول فيما لا يفيد. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد الآخر بالهجات وسلم عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وعلى آله وجلني بجاهه أخذ بيدي إلى الجنات. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد أخذ الصدقات وسلم عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وجله بحاجه أخذ بزمامي إلا أفتى الخيرات سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. These and all great things from this Sufi order brought to you by Cheikh Ahmadu Bamba, Adimo Rasul. Jerry Jeff Sering Tuba, 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 Jerry Jeff Sering Tuba. Until the beloveds meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'm praying for all y'all tonight, so y'all let us all do the same for everyone else in the community of the Prophet Muhammad. Amen.
Amen.
Walaikum salam. Thank you.
Me, wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum wa salam.
Wa alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum.